think we can get started. Anna and Raisa, you can let people in as they come into the waiting room. Thank you for joining us for the second round of our annual reporting training for the session for reporting season for 2025, data reporting. Please know this training will be recorded. We also have available on our portal our first round of training. So if you need access to that, and just go back to if you have any new staff since that last training, you have that access to you. We will also record this training and have that available in the portal and some of the slide materials that accompany this training, so you can have that also as a reference point. Our goal today is for this training is to provide an overview of our annual reporting process and to walk through some examples of more complex transactions, just really about the most frequently asked questions that we're receiving relating to annual reporting transactions related to subsequent private financing and various type of lending and equity type of transactions. We will also use this time to demo how to properly report those type of transactions in the template. So the presenters today will be Raisa. She will provide an overview of the annual reporting requirements. Anna Johnson, a consultant on our team in SSBCI and compliance. She will do a demo of the template, which will include those complex transactions and highlight some of the key functions within the template. Finally, Jay Flowers, SSBCI team member, will provide a demonstration of the portal. He will walk you through the process of certifying and submitting your annual report. We would just want to flag there are jurisdictions that may not have annual report, and that's an executed transaction, meaning anything that's expanded in 2025. That's between January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2025. So if you don't have those, Jay will walk you through how to properly certify in the portal, and we ask you to please try to get those done as soon as possible. That will expedite the process for us. Again, just as a reminder, the portal will open on March 1st and remain open until 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, March 31st, 2026. We do encourage, again, early submission, and if you have any data issue, please work through with us through our one-on-one individualized office hours that we offer in previous years. If you have any questions on completing the templates, we can leverage that one-on-one engagements, office hour session, we call them, to maybe walk you through that. And that will be more of a better process because it will just be with you and we can go through and do more review before we meet up with you. Just as a reminder for everyone, if you are not already, the templates are available as communicated in our Part 1 training for your download. So please start downloading those templates. You're not able to submit until the window officially open on March 1st, but please download your templates and start completing those. And please also ensure that once you download your templates, review it for any issues via your program type. Any approved program that may be incorrect, please let us know as soon as possible. We will reserve time at the end of this training, but we do encourage you to jump in to ask questions, use a chat, raise your hands, and just stop any of us if you have any questions. And if you have, again, specific questions you want to go through not related to annual, please send them to the mailbox. We will gladly answer those. Also, as a reminder, again, we do have those one-on-one office hours are available. We will put that link in the chat for you to set up time with your jurisdictions for us to provide any assistance in reporting, in completing your template or any annual reporting transaction related questions. We do ask you that just to make sure that we're prepared, just provide some topics where you want to discuss general things around your issue. The more detail, the better for us. So please, if you can just help us with that. And those one-on-one sessions are available on Tuesdays and Fridays. So once you go through the invitation, calendar invitation that's available in the link, you can select what time works for you. I will stop there. Again, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. And thank you again for joining us, and we're happy to work with you through this process. Raisa, I'm turning it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Naima. All right, so annual reports for our capital program are required for all jurisdictions that have signed their allocation agreement on or before 12/31/2025. The annual report is a requirement based on your allocation agreement, and Treasury may find jurisdictions in default if we determine that the jurisdiction has materially failed to comply with any terms or conditions under the allocation agreement. The portal will be open for submission starting on March 1st and close on March 31st at 11:59 p.m., as Mima mentioned. The reporting portal will not accept any completed reports until March 31st. For jurisdictions required to submit an annual report template for 2025, those customized templates are available in your template now for download. Email reminders will also go out to all jurisdictions at the beginning of the submission window, and additional reminders will go out prior to the submission deadline, at least 2, possibly more. All right.
Okay, what should be reported on the annual? Something that differentiates the annual report from the quarterly is that the annual focuses on only expended loans or investments, or expended 171, whereas for quarterly, you're reporting EOT. If a jurisdiction has expended transactions in calendar year 2025, then you must submit an annual report. Transactions are considered expended in calendar year 2025 if SSBCI funds were dispersed to a borrower or investee on or before December 31st. Transactions that were closed in a prior year but were not reported on a prior annual report should be reported on the 2025 annual report. For example, if during an internal audit, your jurisdiction discovers expended transactions that closed in 2024 that were not reported on the 2024 annual report, then those transactions should be reported on the 2025 annual report.
Okay, so what should a jurisdiction do if they have no expended transactions for 2025? Are they completely off the hook? Not necessarily. So if the jurisdiction doesn't have expended transactions in calendar year 2025, the jurisdiction will still need to acknowledge in Section 3 of the portal that there were no transactions to report in order to fulfill that annual report requirement mentioned earlier in the allocation agreement. So here we have the steps on the slide. You just go into the portal. Section 3 is going to have a checkbox at the bottom. You just go ahead and check that, saying that you don't have any expended transactions to report. Then navigate to Section 4 and certify and submit. It shouldn't take more than just a few minutes. And Jay is going to go over that later in the presentation as well. All right, so the annual report, like we mentioned, captures expended transactions for 2025. So when filling out the template on the CAP, loan credit, and VC tabs, you should enter 2025 transactions, of course, except in the case of transactions that weren't previously reported. On the last tab of the annual report, it might look a little different from last year. The loan investment performance tab has pre-populated information, including the unique ID, business name, and business EIN for jurisdictions that submitted prior year annual reports. So for those businesses from previous years that were reported, if there is any SSBCI funds lost, equity investments gained, subsequent private financing for those transactions in 2025, that should be reported on the loan investment performance tab. And also for new 2025 transactions entered onto the annual template, they're going to automatically carry over to the loan investment performance tab. And so for those 2025 transactions, you should also input subsequent private financing, SSBCI funds lost, or equity investments gained in 2025, if there is any. All right, so now we have the timeline of how the annual reporting process is going to go. So the jurisdiction downloads the template and completes it. Once it's downloaded and completed, you're going to return to the portal and submit and certify in sections 3 and 4. Then it's going to, the completed annual report template is going to go through our data validation. So for that data validation, we're going to just make sure that the data submitted aligns with the allowable data types and option sets that we have. And if there are any errors resulting from the data validation process, they will need to be corrected prior to the final acceptance of your annual report. So that's why you see these yellow arrows here, because sometimes you can submit your annual report. We run our data validation. We might need you to make some corrections, and we will have you go ahead and make those corrections and resubmit in the portal. Once your data is all good to go, then it's going to move into compliance verification and sampling. So for the annual report, not all jurisdictions will be sampled. So if a jurisdiction is selected for sampling, then that jurisdiction will be notified. And the final step is that the completed data is going to be published, as we do each year, on our SSBCI website. So you can look up for that information for 2025 on the website once we are all done with our processes. Okay, so let's jump into who is the provider. So the first tab on the annual report is the provider tab. So it's going to provide the data to auto-populate the provider column on the CAP transaction tab, loan credit, and VC tab. So it's really important that the appropriate provider is input here. So we just want to make sure that we run through some of these to make sure that you guys are aligning the appropriate provider type with the transaction types. So I won't go into detail here, but just make sure you know for companion loan transaction that the provider is a lender whose loan is a source of private capital at risk. That's where we see some of the deviation from the provider types. And then also if you have a hybrid program, the hybrid program provider is going to follow the program type that you have. So if you have a direct hybrid program, it's going to follow the definition you see here on this slide for direct programs. And if you have a funds investment program, it's going to follow the definition here for a funds program.
Which is the first tab that you will see on the annual report. It's very important for you to visit this tab first because these transactions or these providers that are input on this tab will roll over to the other tabs and will allow you to submit transactions on the other tabs. So one thing to keep in mind for jurisdictions with expended transactions completing the annual report for the first time, you will need to input provider information. If your jurisdiction reported in a previous year, then the provider data from 2022, 2023, and 2024 will be pre-populated. While the data for providers will be pre-populated, the provider data may be edited on the template. So if you need to make any edits to the pre-populated provider data, the template will allow you to do so. The provider tab requires each provider to be linked to the program type associated with the transaction. If the same provider is used for more than one program type, the jurisdiction should enter the provider on the provider tab for as many programs as the provider has expended transactions. For example, if ABC Bank has 3 expended transactions, one in the jurisdiction's LPP, one in the jurisdiction's LGP, and one in the jurisdiction's CSP, then ABC Bank should appear on the provider tab 3 times, one for each of those programs. Okay, also on the provider tab for jurisdictions with BC Fund programs, the target venture capital fund size should be reported on the provider tab. Please do not report the total fund size amount. So here on the slide, we have the distinction between the two. I'll go ahead and read the definitions very quickly. So the target fund size is the sum of SSBCI funds and all private capital commitments the participating jurisdiction identified as available to invest alongside the jurisdiction's SSBCI funds, while the total fund size includes SSBCI and all capital commitments, including any additional government funds and any private capital available to support non-SSBCI investments. So on this provider tab in the column that's asking for target venture capital fund size, we are looking for the target venture capital fund size as it is described here in this definition. Also for VC fund programs that were previously listed with the target fund size from previous reporting, be sure to update that target fund size if the number has changed. And for reference, the target fund size should match the amount reported in column E on the funds notification form. And if in a previous year you had input the total fund size rather than the target fund size, go ahead and use this as an opportunity to update that and make sure it is the target fund size.
Okay, so this slide here, provider resource is going to apply to loan transactions. So these are some information that will help you identify the correct provider regulatory ID. Specifically, it'll help for CDFIs, credit unions, and depository institutions. So you can go ahead and hit the links here and just make sure you have the appropriate provider regulatory ID for the lenders that you have enrolled. Also be sure when you're inputting the provider information, you're using the full name for each lender. That means that there should be no abbreviations or no shorthand should be used. And also do your best to not include misspelling. Okay, here we have the loan or investment transaction amount. This is also important. It's going to show the SSBCI funds combined with the private capital for each transaction. I won't go into these. These are fairly straightforward. It's going to be For the CAP, loan guarantee and collateral support, it's going to be the private capital from the lender supported by the CAP reserve account or SSBCI guarantee or collateral deposit. For loan participation program transactions, the loan transaction amount is the private capital from the lender and the SSBCI funds. And for both direct programs and funds programs, it's the investment, it's the private capital investment plus other private co-investors plus the SSBCI funds in the financing round. All right, and then SSBCI allocated funds. This one is also fairly straightforward. We're going to be just looking to capture the amount of SSBCI funds in the transaction here in this SSBCI allocated funds column, and we have specific definitions here from the reporting guidance. All right, so we're going to get into how to report recycled funds. We discussed this last time at the annual report training part 1. And like Mayma mentioned, if you haven't looked at annual training part 1, it's currently in the portal under the resources tab. So that's going to be really important for you to go ahead and look at. So here we're just going to be elaborating on that. So first, recycled funds are SSBCI funds that are returned to the jurisdiction and redeployed into new loans or investments. So if the money has not been redeployed, then it is not considered recycled and should not be reported as recycled funds. So here we have an example. A small business investee receives an SSBCI supported investment in which the jurisdiction provides $100,000 in SSBCI recycled dollars on a $200,000 investment. On the annual report, $200,000 should be reported under investment transaction amount and $100,000 should be reported under SSBCI recycled funds. And the key here is going to be that there is no amount that should be reported under SSBCI allocated funds expended for this transaction because it used recycled funds. So there are situations that we've seen where jurisdictions are using recycled funds and SSBCI allocated funds in the same transaction. So if you have SSBCI allocated funds and recycled funds in the same transaction, that's perfectly allowable. And in that situation, of course, there would be an amount listed under SSBCI allocated funds expended, just not in this specific example. All right, subsequent private financing is another hot topic that we got a lot of questions on. So the definition here from reporting guidance, I think would be really helpful for jurisdictions to visit and just make sure that this private financing is in fact in line with the definition that we have for subsequent private financing. I also want to clarify that public dollars should be excluded from subsequent private financing. I think I mentioned this already, that 2025 transactions are perfectly acceptable to have subsequent private financing as well. For example, you have a transaction that closed in January of 2025, and maybe in July or August, you have some subsequent private financing on that same transaction. That's perfectly allowable. So subsequent private financing doesn't necessarily have to just be from a previous year. It can be from within the same year. Okay, so let's take an example. A small business receives a $20,000 SSBCI supported loan from a bank as part of Jurisdiction Z's LPP program. The loan strengthens the borrower's overall creditworthiness. As a result, at a later date, the bank approves the borrower for an additional $50,000 working capital loan that is not an SSBCI supported transaction. So on the annual report, that $50,000 would be reported under subsequent private financing column on the loan investment performance tab. The unique transaction ID, business name, and business EIN associated with the original $20,000 loan should be reported on the same line. Okay. So another hot topic that we've seen a lot recently is lines of credit or loans or investments that have multiple draws. So for those SSBCI, for those transactions, we're looking to see that if the SSBCI funds have been dispersed to support the lender's loan, then the jurisdiction would report the full amount of both the lenders and the SSBCI allocated SSBCI allocated funds expended under loan transaction amount and the full amount of SSBCI's portion of the line of credit or loan under SSBCI allocated funds expended. So again, that's going to be, I'll just wait till the example for you guys to understand the loan part of this. So similarly for staged investments in an equity investment transaction, if a portion of the private and SSBCI funds have been dispersed to the investee, then the full amount of funds in the investment contract to be invested in the small business should be reported under investment transaction amount, and the full amount of the SSBCI portion of the transaction under SSBCI allocated funds expended. So that's going to be for staged investments in equity programs. And so here we have an example on the loan side. So jurisdiction Z closed on a loan for $300,000 with ABC Bank on 2/3/2025. The loan was $150,000 SSBCI and $150,000 ABC Bank. Borrower received its first draw of funding on 3/31/2025 and will be eligible for its next round funding draw of $100,000 on 3/31/2026. So on the 2025 annual report, the jurisdiction would report the full $300,000 under loan transaction amount, and $150,000 should be reported under SSBCI allocated funds expended. Okay, so that's for 2025, and the disbursement date for that would be the date of that first draw of funding, 3/31/2025. Okay, so how to report guarantee collateral deposit set-asides. So for these transactions, only the dollar amount of SSBCI allocated funds set aside to cover the guarantee commitment or collateral support deposit should be reported as SSBCI allocated funds expended. This is something that we went into a little bit last time, so I'll jump right into the example. Jurisdiction Z issued collateral support to ABC Bank for a loan with a principal amount of $100,000. The jurisdiction set aside, i.e. dispersed, $20,000 to ABC Bank for this loan that had a $60,000 guarantee amount. On the annual report, the $100,000 should be reported under loan transaction amount and $20,000 should be reported under SSBCI allocated funds expended. And it would be the $20,000 because that is the amount that the jurisdiction set aside for this transaction. Right, and in our last topic here, we have follow-on investments. So in equity programs, there are investments that can be made in a small business, and then in a subsequent year or a subsequent round, the jurisdiction makes an investment into that same business. So that's a follow-on investment. So follow-on investments should be reported as separate transactions for both the annual report and the disbursement request form. The follow-on investment should have its own unique transaction ID, and the unique transactions ID may be similar. This is something that Anna's going to get into very shortly. So let's get into an example. Jurisdiction Z made an initial SSBCI investment in Company A on 6/14/2024 and reported that transaction to Treasury. The jurisdiction is supporting a follow-on SSBCI investment of $200,000 in Company A on 7/2/2025. At that time, there were no additional private capital investments there was an additional private capital investment of $200,000 in the same round, and no new jobs resulted from the second transaction. So on the annual report, the $400,000 should be reported under investment transaction amount, and $200,000 should be reported under SSBCI allocated funds expended. All right, so I'm going to pass it to Anna, who's going to go over how these examples and more are going to look like on the actual annual report. So I'll go ahead and stop my share here. And Anna,
Great,
you can take it away.
Thank you, Risa. And just a quick note, I'm getting some questions in the chat. We will get back to you. Just please keep posting the questions so we don't have time to get to them in this training. We will just follow up with the email. So please keep posting the questions. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we will go through the template demo. Can everyone see my screen here?
Yep, we can see your screen.
All right, perfect. So this is the annual report template. As a reminder from the part 1 of the training, it has a total of 8 tabs, but only 5 tabs actually require the data input. We have the tooltips tab and also the last 2 tabs for the single select validation and multi-select validations. These are just tabs to facilitate and help you update the template. It just provides you with some information on how to populate each data element and some allowable options for multi-select and single select data inputs. So before you start updating the template, we encourage you to do a couple of tests just to make sure the template functions as intended. So the first test is on the provider tab. We pre-populated the information of the providers from previous reports. Also in column A, in the approved program name, there is a drop down which should list all of the approved programs for each jurisdictions. So please go through this list, make sure it's accurate, especially if you had any modifications. It's very important to check that everything in this list is complete and accurate. And if you see any issues, please reach out to us so we can correct it. Another quick check that we recommend you doing is just to test the multi-select functionality on of the template. So for example, on CAP transactions tab, if I go to the column AQ, this data input requires the multi-select. So if I double click on the cell in row 2, I see that this options appear here where I can select several options and populate them. If you run this test and you see that everything is working, that, you should be good to go. It means that template is functioning as intended and there should be no issues with populating it. Okay. Next time I want to cover a few examples for some of the more complex transactions where we receive the templates, the sort of similar examples to what Raisa covered, but I will show in more details how to report it. So first transaction that we have here, this is the LPP companion loan. And as Raisa mentioned, in a situation where you have a companion loan, please complete this template for the private capital loan. So in this situation, the private capital loan was issued by the community bank. So please enter this provider here. So in this scenario, we have a loan of $100,000, which was disbursed on January 1st of 2025. But in this particular example, there was actually no SSBCI allocated funds used to support this loan. Instead, the jurisdiction chose to use the recycled funds. And as Raisa mentioned already, recycled funds are the funds that come to jurisdictions in the form of program income, principal repayment, return of investments, and these are the funds that jurisdictions redeployed in the form of the new loan or investment. So because no SSBCI allocated funds were used to support this loan, we will not report anything in the column Y. Instead, we will report this recycled funds expended in column C. And we'll put $50,000 here. In addition to this, we also had concurrent private financing that happened for this loan of $20,000. So we're going to report them in column AB. And the concurrent private financing is any financing which resulted, which was made as a result of SSBCI supported loan and which occurred around the same time as SSBCI supported loan. So this private financing occurred sometime around 1/1/2025, and it resulted from the SSBCI supported loan. So we will report this $20,000 here in column AB. And then we will report all other data elements here. Again, I encourage everyone to reference to part 1 of training, where we went in a lot of details of how to populate, pretty much every single cell of this template. So please reference there. We'll have a recording of the training. And then again, for the companion loan, just a reminder, for the loan information, we'll want you to fill out and complete this part of the loan for the private capital loan, not the SSBCI loan. All right. The next topic I'd like to cover is for the same loan ID, unique transaction ID is ID_123. Also had the subsequent private financing. And subsequent private financing is actually reported on the loan investment performance tab. And as a reminder from last training, the column A, B, and C are going to be automatically populated in a template just based on the inputs in other tabs. So you do not have to complete columns A, B, and C. Once you complete all other tabs and you come to this step, you should see that you should be able to find a transaction. So in our case, this is the transaction for the loan. And in our example, we had $10,000 subsequent private financing. So we're going to populate it right here. You will see that this tab is populated for previous year transactions, So please, if you have any subsequent private financing to report or column E and F, you can go in and update this here. And this is it's important to update the subsequent private financing because it counts toward the 10-to-1 ratio. So please make sure you update this information here. All right. The next example that I would like to cover relates to the line of credit or loans with multiple draws examples. So this example is populated here in row 4. So I'm going to go scroll over here. So in our example, we have a $300,000 loan, but this loan is not, it was not dispersed, it's not dispersed in a lump sum. It actually has 2 tranches. So we had a first tranche, which was dispersed on March 31st, 2025 for $150,000. And then the second tranche will be dispersed on March 31st, 2026. So in year 2, and that's going to be for additional $150,000. So 2 tranches, year 1 and year 2. But for the purposes of the annual report, we're actually asking jurisdictions to report the entire loan transaction amount in year 1. The same for SSBCI allocated funds. The entire SSBCI allocated funds, I think this one is collateral support program, correct? So entire set aside should be reported in year 1 of $150,000. It's important to remember that when you have a second tranche disbursement in 2026, please do not report that tranche 2 on 2026 annual report template because that will result in overstatement for these amounts. So just remember that entire amount was reported already in 2025. Entire loan amount was reported, so you do not have to report second tranche on the 2026 annual report template in this example. Okay. Also, similar logic applies to reporting the stage investments. So if you have any equity investments which are in stages, similar logic applies. Just report it on the disbursement date for the first disbursement of the investment. So similar logic for reporting. Another example that we would like to cover is example for the guarantees. So this is the loan guarantee program. So in our example here, we have a disbursement of the loan, an amount of $100,000. Disbursement occurred on February 1st of 2025. For this loan, there was a guarantee of $60,000 and $20,000 of set aside. So as Raisa mentioned, when you populate in the annual report template, please do not populate the guarantee amount in column Y for SSBCI allocated funds. Please populate the set aside amount of $20,000 here. But of course, the full amount of the loan should be populated in column X. But in column Y, we're asking to populate the set aside amount, not the guarantee amount. And the guarantee amount, percentage-wise from the loan and set aside percentage should align with the legal agreements. So it should be consistent with the program application. Okay. So the last example that I'm going to cover relates to the follow-on investment. So I'm going to switch to the VC equity tab here where we have this information populated. So in this example, we have 2 investments dispersed to the same business. So what we're asking jurisdictions to do in this situation is actually report them as 2 separate transactions, but we do advise to name them somewhat consistently so we can see that they tie to each other, that they relate to the same business. As you can see, Robbie's right, same business. So for example, these unique transaction IDs are pretty much identical, but the second investment has the little b. So it kind of identifies that these two transactions are related, but they are still reported as two separate transactions. And then you populate all of this information for each investment. Oops. The business information should be the same, obviously, because these investments are dispersed to the same business. So please make sure this information is consistent. And then you will just populate the information related to each investment. So in this example, the first investment was dispersed on January 28th, and the second one was dispersed on July 2nd. And there are two different amounts for these investments, and SSBCI allocated funds expended are different, and so you can populate it here. And I think the purpose of these investments were also different. The first investment was to support the construction of the new building, and the second investment was to support the working capital of the business. So you can update all of this information as it pertains to each investment. What we do want to emphasize is when you populate information related to full-time equivalent employees, expected jobs created, and expected jobs retained, please make sure and be careful not to double count these disclosures. So in our example, at the time of the first investment, the business employed 25 full-time equivalent employees, and the first investment resulted in 3 expected jobs created and 5 expected jobs retained. When we come and report the second investment, we actually do not want to repeat or report the same information to avoid double counting. We'll only report any incremental information here. So let's say, for example, if at the time of the second investment, business hired additional employees and now had 27 employees, then instead of reporting 27 for the second investment, we'll just report 2. So just report the incremental change. And the same comes to this column AD and AE. We just report the incremental information here. But in this example, we have here, nothing changed, the same number of full-time employees, the same number of expected jobs created and expected jobs retained. So we're actually just going to report 0 across here for the second investment. So we're not double counting information. All right, I think this is all I have for the demo. So Raisa, I'm going to pass it back to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to pause for questions, maybe? Maybe see if there's any questions out there.
Yes.
We can pause for questions. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Raisa. Do we have any questions? I think Anna had some questions. We answered those with the chat. One of the questions we received was if should target fund size include SSBCI funds? That question we answer yes, target fund size should include SSBCI funds. Anything else, Anna or Raisa, you want to questions you want to?
I'm seeing some questions in the chat, Mema, but I think I will just ask for the email of this so we can move on with our training.
Okay, so for the questions that Anna and Raisa have in the chat, they might need more detail around that. So please feel free to send that. Or if you already have time scheduled, if it's specific to the template or reporting on the template, like we said earlier, please schedule time and we will go through your template and your individual program. If we have no questions, I will thank you again, ladies. I will turn it over to Jay Flowers. He will help us with demonstrating how to access the portal, to get your templates downloaded, to submit, and to certify. Jay, thanks for your help. The floor is yours.
Yeah, no worries. Can you confirm you're hearing me pretty clearly, my voice?
That's correct.
Okay, very good, very good. So it's going to take me another 20 seconds to load up my sandbox area where I have everything set up. So give me about 30 seconds. In the meantime, I put 2 chats in, I put 2 URLs inside of the chat. Both of those are going to be links to the portal. The first link is going to be the link directly to the CARES Act section of the portal where you have all of the CARES Act programs. The second link that has the SSBCI-home-page as the suffix takes you directly to SSBCI's portion of the portal. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen where everything is all set up, everything is looking good. And this first screen that we're taking a look at is where you would land if you click that first link. Again, that is if you have multiple programs within inside of the CARES Act. That first link is the one that you would use, and you have the ability to hit dismiss, and then you can scroll down and see all the different programs that you have access to. If you only have an SSBCI program, you click on that second link and you see my URL up top and included that SSBCI homepage. That second link is the link that takes you directly to this page here. So once you're on this page, you take a look at the left-hand side. We call this our left-hand navigation side. And we're doing annual reporting today. So I'm going to click on the Capital Program Reports tab. This is going to take you to the reports page. It's titled My Reports, and it defaults to the quarterly reports page. For annual, just simply click on the second tab to the right, and that drops you inside of the table for your annual reports. Now, I have a bunch here. This is my sandbox area, so I do a lot of testing in here. So you're not going to see as many records as you do here, but you will see the current annual report object right here. And you can see that by the reporting period of January 1, 2025 to December 31st, 2025. You're also going to see the submission window, which is going to be March 1st through March 30th. I had to change mine to February to let me get in and edit everything before the window opens. So once you locate your annual report record, you just click on the blue pencil icon. And again, before the portal opens up on the first, it's going to have a dark blue view only. And this is where I believe others may have mentioned that your template is available. So you can click on that dark blue view icon up until the first to go ahead and get in and get that template downloaded. So we're going to act like we're in the submission window, and I'm going to click the light blue pencil icon to get in and edit. The first thing that you're going to see, you're going to be dropped on is going to be your annual report user instructions. On the left-hand side, just going to give you a little bit about the navigation in the portal. On the left-hand side, we again have our left-hand nav, and you can click through the different sections of the annual report. And then on the bottom of each page, we can get back to a subsequent page, or we can go to another subsequent page or a page forward. So those are your two navigation options. And over on the right-hand side, we have what we call a widget, and it's going to give you information about your jurisdiction, the reporting period, and the deadline. Again, this reporting period is correct for the current reporting period. You're going to see February 30th, 2026 when you log in. Again, the user instructions, we have a couple of things here that you may want to download if you get a chance. Is we do have the Capital Program Reporting Guidance link here. We also have the Capital Program Policy Guideline links here. And then we have an Annual Report User Guide here. Moving on to Section 2. Section 2 is going to be the participating jurisdiction information. It simply just gives all information about your implementing entity. Again, this is my testing environment, so this is not accurate. But you want to just make sure that you're checking this information that you're seeing here in the implementing entity area to make sure everything is okay. If you have any issues with that, just email us to our inbox. I'll put it in the chat unless one of my colleagues can get that in there. And that's going to be the SSBCI_information@treasury.gov. Shoot us over an email, and then we'll make sure that we get everything squared away for you. The second thing that we see on this contacts page is going to be this contacts area. This table is not showing up for me today, but you typically see a list of all of your contacts within inside of your jurisdiction. You can, again, send information over to the SSBCI_information if it is incorrect. Otherwise, we have this word page highlighted right here, and this is over to our Treasury COVID-19 Relief Hub. On this page, you can click through, and it's going to give you a introduction, certification, and designation form. If it's your first time logging in to this area, you're not going to see a designation form, and you're going to have to fill in the certification form in order to see this designation form option. And basically, this is just a testing that you have the ability or the rights to add contacts to your jurisdiction's account. Once you hit submit here, the designation form pops up, and you see a couple of things on here, and then down on the bottom, you will see a contacts table. And here's where you can add a new contact, and you can edit a new contact. We're going to go ahead and just add a new contact really quickly, and we're just going to put in the first name and need to put in everything that has an asterisk next to a field. So we're going to drop a couple of tests in here. And once you add that information, then you have options for the role that you want. Basically what happens here is we have 3 different roles for the portal. The first one is going to be the administrator. So everything has a prefix of the program that you're trying to add someone to. So you see all 4 of those are capital. A little further down, you're going to see TA as the prefix, and then we have SBOP as well. You see SBOP as a prefix. Essentially for the means of reporting, the account administrator can both view and download the template from the portal. The point of contact can view, download, and upload a completed template. And then the authorized representative can view, download, but they're the only one that can certify and submit on behalf of your jurisdiction. So once you have the appropriate role selected, we on the right-hand side have some communications roles. So if you want information about the capital reporting, CA reporting, or SBOP, you can select those and hit add new contact, and that will add that to the table down below. And you'll see that right here as the top entry that I just added. Again, if you see something in error and you're not familiar or you don't want to go through this whole process, just contact us at the SSBCI_information@treasury.gov, and we'll help you out to get everything squared away for you. So we just finished up with section 2. We're going to move over to section 3. And this is the area where we had the Excel upload. We also provided the capital program reporting guidance up here. We have some information about what we're looking for in the reporting. That was also covered by Raisa and Anna a little while ago. And if you scroll down just a little further, you're going to see the word here. If you click on that, it's not going to do it for me. It's going to give me an error. But if you click that, on the top hand right, you should see the downloads of that file that downloaded for you. And that is where you're going to be able to access your template. If you don't see this download prompt here, you can also find it inside of your File Explorer, and wherever your default download, I guess, folder is going to be is where that's going to be listed. So in my downloads, it would drop right here. So if you have that, you can have that filled in, and then you can come back in here and you can upload it. Now, there was one thing that Rice had mentioned a little earlier, is that there are several jurisdictions that may not have reportable expended transactions in calendar year 2025. Here's where you would just click this box, and I want you to watch this upload files. You click this box, and it grayed out upload files, so you do not have the opportunity to upload anything. This is, again, just a confirmation or affirmation that you do not have anything to report for calendar year 2025. And as we also mentioned, this is a requirement just to submit, and this is the caveat of the way around submitting without putting up a file. Just click the checkbox here. Once you do that, you can go over to section 4 and you can submit and certify here. We're going to go back. And again, those templates are available now. So we encourage you on March 1st, log in. If you have no reportable expendable transactions, get it out of the way, submit it to us, and then you have nothing else to do for the rest of the year as far as annual reporting is concerned. So we're going to drop back to section 3, and I'm going to uncheck this box, because what we need to do is once you have your template downloaded, filled in, you come back into section 3 and you upload during the upload file section. And then you navigate through where you may have everything saved. If you notice, this only gives me the option of an Excel spreadsheet. So you click on that and hit open. I'm going to drop the file in this table right here once this word done turns blue. And you click it. And then you're going to see a table populate with the file. And don't get alarmed, we add a final underscore in front of the name of the file. So once you have everything uploaded, and let's say you do this on March 1st, and you come back on March 10th and say, hey, we made a mistake in one area, or we need to correct some things. You can always come back in and click that box right next to the file name, and then click delete files, and that is going to give you a deleting section files. That table disappeared. You come back in and say, all right, here's my updated file that I want to upload. So we click that, the word done turns blue, the table populates, and then we can move on to section 4 in order to certify and submit. There's one little caveat about deleting files. It's only available during the submission window. So once you have that file uploaded, you come back over here, and I always suggest copying your name here and pasting it in there. I say that because this area is both case and space sensitive. So if you saw me change that to a lowercase s and I click certify and submit, it's going to give me an error. Just come back in here and change that back to capital S. And again, just copy this area right here. Come back in here, paste it in here, and then you can certify and submit. Once you click that, you're going to see the status change to submitted. You're going to get a green success. If you scroll down a little bit, you're going to have an unsubmit report. Very similar to how we saw in section 3 a minute ago, where I said you can delete and upload an updated file. This allows you to unsubmit your report if you did that same thing by submitting an erroneous file. And again, this is only available during the submission window. So after March 30, this is not available. So we're going to go ahead and click that real quickly, unsubmit. It's going to give us a confirmation that that is what we want to do. We'll just say yes. And then we come back in and we see section 3 is empty again. So guess what? We're going to upload our updated file. Wait for blue done, click yes. The table is going to open up. That looks good. Certify and submit. We are going to copy this. And then we're going to paste it in here. We hit certify and submit. You get a green confirmation. Submitted turns here. And you also have a confirmation down here. So this is the submission for a typical annual report submission. What I want to do real quickly is go over what a modified certification submission looks like. And it's the exact same thing as that we just talked about, except for one section. It's going to be a little different. So we're going to jump into that test file. And that section right now has turned to modified certification submission page. So same information here. You're going to have everything in red. It's going to be the annual reporting period. It's going to have the window, and you're going to see March 1st through March 30th. And the widget is also going to be the same. And section 2 is going to be the same. Same thing here. If the implementing entity is different or it's not what you expected, contact us at the SSBCI_information@treasury.gov, and we'll make sure we get that squared away for you. Section 3 still has the same upload. So we're going to upload. Once we have that uploaded, the blue done, the table is populated, we move over to section 4. So this is just a little bit of different information presented to you. And this is probably some stuff that with the conversation with compliance, you may already know what you need to submit, but it gives you, again, some expectations of the modified certification and submission page. And you're going to scroll down and you're going to read all this information. And at the bottom, you're going to have a required attachment A to the modified certification on use of allocated funds. Again, click that, and that will download for you. Once you have that filled in, you can come into the uploader in section 4. And this is going to be for your modified certification. And now you see you have different forms that are available. We always like to do PDF. So we're going to open that. And we're going to drop that PDF inside of here once this blue done is clicked. And you see that dropped into the table. So we're still in section 4, and we're just going to scroll down a little bit. And this is the area where you can copy your name here, paste it in here, click certify and submit. You're going to get a green success. And then you're also going to get a green submitted I think that was it. I know that we really encourage everyone to get into the portal as quick as possible to test everything out. For those that don't have any expendable transactions for 2025, guess what? You just come into section 3 on that typical submission, click the check boxes down on the bottom, and you move over to section 4 and certify and submit. You're done within 2 minutes. So I don't know if we have time for any quick questions. We typically don't have questions about the portal, but there are any questions. We can take those. As I am finished with the physical demo part of the portal.
I do not see
Thank
any
you, Jay.
additional questions. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah,
outstanding. Thank you. Thank you.
I think we will, Jay, I think Jay, your hands are up. I'm like, Jay, do you have a question, Jay, too? But I think we're good on that front. So if no additional question, we will turn it back over to Raisa. She will close out on some last remaining items. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Mayma. Okay, go ahead and share. Okay. All right, so now we're going to get into some tips. These are tips in completing the annual report as well as tips for the actual template. So these are important tips, and I know some of them are going to be from previously from the part 1 of the training as well. But again, these are things that we're seeing on a consistent basis. So we just really want to make sure that folks are hearing this as many times as possible. Okay, so the first one is double counting. So for jurisdictions with multiple transactions to the same borrower or investee, just ensure that the information is not double counted. And by double counted means you should only report for that business once across these transactions. This includes full FTEs, jobs created, jobs retained, additional government funds, concurrent private financing, and subsequent private financing. So just make sure if you have a business that is receiving multiple SSBCI transactions, that you are only reporting for those data elements just the one time. And for FTEs in particular, it would be the delta, which I think is a later on tip. Okay, so then we're going to go into eligible business purpose. Of course, all of these SSBCI expended transactions should be eligible. So just make sure when you're receiving documentation for these transactions that the SSBCI supported loan or investment was used for an eligible business purpose. And you can reference the policy guidelines for information there. Then we have the NAICS code. This should not be left blank. The NAICS code must be a 6-digit code from the 2022 NAICS code list. And that list can actually be accessed here on the slide. Once we send out this deck, you can use this to make sure you're using the appropriate and latest NAICS code. Business EIN. For businesses that use their social security number in place of a business EIN, we really want to make sure you're not providing the social security number. So instead of the social security number, you're putting in the letters SSN, okay, as the social security number under business EIN, just the letters SSN. Okay, so we saw a number of instances of duplicate business EINs for different businesses. We think this might be a result of copying and pasting. So just make sure that you review your EIN numbers. So making sure that there is not a business EIN that is used under different business names, particularly if you are copy and pasting. And also, just as a good reference point, if the EINs are the same, then the business name should also be the same. That means in terms of how it's spelled, how it's written out, just make sure that that's also matching if it's the same business EIN. All right, and the disbursement date, since these are all expended transactions, the date should be the date on which SSBCI funds were received by the borrower or the investee. So just make sure that you're using that date for the disbursement date, and it can be substantiated by documentation. Okay, upfront fees. So this is something that's present on the loan tab. Just make sure when you are inputting the upfront fees that it excludes fees paid to the program. So for example, the guarantee fee paid to the state should not be included in this field, and also do not include the cap premium in the total upfront fees. So when you are reporting FTEs for the same business with multiple transactions, only report the incremental change in FTEs on the subsequent transaction. If there is no difference in FTEs, enter 0, but do not leave this field blank for this for the business's subsequent transaction. Okay, business revenue, instead of putting in the actual number for the business revenue, it's a drop box. So you're just going to select from the drop box. It's going to be different ranges of business revenue, 0 to 100,000, 100,001 to $1 million, $1,000,001 to 10 million, and then over 10 million. Those are the different ranges that you can select for the business based on the documentation you received. Multiple co-borrowers. For jurisdictions with transactions that involve multiple co-borrowers, the jurisdiction should report the co-borrower or business that is primarily benefiting from the transaction, and be sure to imply that consistently, not using one co-borrower on one transaction and another co-borrower on another. Just make sure it's consistent there. For refinancing transactions, you should report the primary purpose of the underlying loan that's being refinanced, and then refinancing can be listed under the secondary business purpose. And also just as a quick reminder, that underlying business purpose for any of the loans that are being refinanced must also be compliant with SSBCI program requirements. Okay, and this is going to apply to cap transactions. So the federal contribution cannot be used to match any amount in excess of the sum of the borrower and the financial institution lender contributions. So like we talked about earlier with the validation, that's one of the things that this template is going to pick up on. So just make sure that it is not in excess of the sum of the borrower and the financial institution's contribution. Maximum interest rate. So for variable interest rate loans that do not indicate a specific maximum interest rate, but instead state that the interest rate will not exceed the legally allowable rate, just report either the legal allowable rate or the SSBCI maximum at the time of the obligation, whichever is lower. Then also on that loan tab, there's a column for interest rate at the time of obligation. So there you would report the actual interest rate at the time of obligation. And it could be the maximum rate, but it's typically not the maximum rate. So just make sure you're using the interest rate at the time of obligation. And then we have SETI. So just keep in mind that these SETI fields are multi-select. So you're going to just double click into the cell and just make sure that pop-up box comes up and you click on the relevant fields. And so make sure that you're selecting the correct SETI category by referencing the tooltip. I know sometimes since there's 4 categories, sometimes they can sound pretty similar. Just make sure that you're using the right SETI category that matches the transaction that you're inputting at the time by just double checking the tooltip, make sure it's the right one. Okay, so also we have macros on our template that are going to help jurisdictions use the drop-down menu and the pop-up boxes, the multi-select options. So once you receive, once the macros are enabled, you're going to see a banner at the top of your template. So just make sure you hit enable content, and this is going to allow those in-template validations and option sets to work for you. So we have a link here. There's some jurisdictions that are experiencing technical issues with the macros. So first, we'd like you to take a look at this article that we have here that's going to help you enable those macros. Your next step is going to be getting in touch with your jurisdiction's IT department. If your jurisdiction's IT department is not able to help you enable those macros, then feel free to reach out to SSBCI and we'll try to figure out what we can do as a solution. Okay, so on the actual template, we just want to make sure that jurisdictions are filling this out appropriately. So just as a quick reminder, fill out all the required fields in the template. Do your best to not leave any rows blank. And also just as a quick reminder, if you are selecting other in any of the columns, there's usually going to be a corresponding other description field. So just make sure that if you're selecting other, you're prepared to provide additional information on what exactly that other is. Which goes into the next one, which is if a cell is highlighted in yellow, it indicates that a previously entered value requires additional explanation. So just be sure that if you're seeing cells highlight into yellow, that you are trying to figure out what exactly is going on in the previous cell to make sure that you are inputting the correct data into that cell that you're on. Okay, so when entering the unique transaction ID, make sure there's no space at the end of the transaction ID number. This is going to be important because if there is an extra space at the end of your unique transaction ID, then it's the template's going to have an issue transferring that transaction to the loan investment performance tab. So just make sure there's no extra space at the end. And also for anyone having any issues with transactions populating on the loan investment transaction tab, a loan investment performance tab, just go back to the unique ID, make sure there is no additional space, and then see if that is able to make it come over to the performance tab. Okay, so also some additional help that we can provide to make sure that you're using the template in its full capacity and all the macros enabled is make sure it's saved in a secure folder and not opened in protected view. If you open the document in protected view, that can disable the macros. A suggestion that we've seen had a lot of success is jurisdictions downloading the template to OneDrive. Typically, if you download the template to OneDrive, you shouldn't have any issues with the macros. So if the template is uploaded to a shared folder, which is on SharePoint, Teams, and any other similar platform, Just make sure when you're opening it up, you don't use Excel online, use the desktop Excel app. That also is going to interfere if you open it on Excel online. That's also going to interfere with the macros as well. Okay, so we also ask that you do not remove pre-populated providers on the provider tab. Doing so can cause some errors when we're doing our data input. So if you have pre-populated providers, you don't have to use them for any of the transactions, but don't remove them from the provider tab. Okay, and just as a general rule, do not alter the template in any other way. We just want to make sure that we're not having any issues with the validation. Like I mentioned earlier in the timeline, we want to try to incorporate all of these tips to limit that back and forth potentially to make sure you have that clean information. So altering the template in any way could prolong that time that the validation takes. All right, and so we have multi-select fields that you double click on the cell to open the selection menu, and then there's single select fields where you use a drop-down menu. So if there's any variation from the provided single select or multi-select options, it's not acceptable. The usual variation that we see is folks inputting information manually. So just make sure that you're not inputting information manually that should be selected from a drop-down menu or selected from the multi-select pop-up box. So if you're entering multiple values in a single cell, be sure to separate each value with a semicolon, but the key here is to not end that with a semicolon as well, or else the template is going to look for another value there. So here you can see there's self-certification due to gender, disability, and veteran status, and then nothing else. But here, this is the incorrect example. There's another semicolon here. Just make sure, again, to lessen the time in the data validation phase, just make sure that you don't have that semicolon here so that we don't have any back and forth on something pretty minor. Okay, and then we're going to round it out here with our compliance resources. So we have a lot of information here that's going to help you complete your SSBCI Capital Program annual report. So go ahead and look through these documents. And again, as always, we have the questions process. If you have any questions, go ahead and submit that in the inbox. And like Naima mentioned earlier, we also have the office hours that is open for jurisdictions to get some time with us to go over any questions that they might have. All right, I am going to pass it back to Naima, and we're going to have some open time for questions.
Thank you, Raisa. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Jay. The floor is open for anyone who may have questions. Again, like Raisa said, we're reserving time. So if you want to go over your questions with your template on share screen, that may be something you want to do. So please reserve some time with us. On Tuesdays or Fridays is when we are offering those office hour sessions, I believe. And correct me if I'm wrong, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Correct.
Thank you. And again, we will provide this recording. The previous recording from December is available in the first session where we went through more detail in the template, as Anna stated in her presentation. So we will hold time, but feel free to drop if you don't have any questions. Just to echo Jay, please try to get into the portal as soon as possible to make sure your template is downloaded. Review your information, your pre-populated information. Like Raisa said, if you're not using a provider from prior reporting, please don't remove them. Just keep them as it is, those pre-populated information. And again, we're here. Please, we do encourage early submissions and take into account all the best practices Raisa just went through. That will really help us reduce some of the back and forth that we've had in previous years. Our goal is to give you as much time back from SSBC as possible as you complete your work. So I have nothing else. Raisa, Anna, Jay, anything you want to add before we conclude?
Nothing on my end.
Yeah, no questions in the chat either. So I think that means everything was perfectly clear.
Yeah, sounds like that to me. Thank you all. Again, we appreciate you making time. We look forward to reviewing your 2025 transactions, and we do appreciate all the hard work all your work with us to get this process going. We know it's a lot, so thank you for all your help, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Right.